long before human beings learned to write their names into stone, before cities glowed at night or ships crossed oceans beneath electric stars. The Earth belonged to creatures so vast and strange that even now they feel almost dreamlike. In the silence of deep geological time, entire worlds appeared and vanished without witness. Mountains rose slowly from ancient seabeds, forests spread across humid continents. The air itself changed composition again and again, and moving through those forgotten landscapes were the dinosaurs, animals that survived for nearly 170 million years, far longer than humans have existed at all. It is difficult for the modern mind to truly absorb that amount of time. Human civilization occupies only the thinnest layer at the very top of Earth's history, like a small dusting of snow on a mountain formed over unimaginable ages. Dinosaurs lived so long that the famous Tyrannosaurus rex existed closer in time to modern humans than to the earliest dinosaurs. Between the first dinosaur footsteps and the last, entire ecosystems evolved, flourished, and disappeared. Oceans opened and closed, continents drifted apart with the patience of glaciers. The moon itself slowly moved farther from Earth. And yet, despite their enormous scale in our imagination, dinosaurs were once simply animals living ordinary lives. A massive sauropod lowering its neck toward a riverbank at dawn. Small feathered hunters resting beneath fern shadows during afternoon heat. Herds moving across floodplains while volcanic smoke gathered at distant horizons. These moments were not dramatic to the creatures themselves. They were simply life unfolding day after day beneath unfamiliar skies. The ancient Earth they inhabited would feel both recognizable and deeply alien to us. During much of the dinosaur age, sea levels were higher than today, and warm, shallow oceans covered large parts of the continents. Polar regions often lacked permanent ice. Dense forests stretched across enormous distances, filled with conifers, cycads, giant ferns, and plants that no longer dominate modern landscapes. The air may have carried heavier humidity, richer scents of vegetation, and the distant sounds of insects unlike any alive now. At night, many dinosaur worlds would have been astonishingly dark. There were no human lights, no roads, no aircraft moving overhead, only moonlight crossing enormous forests. Only wind through prehistoric leaves, only stars burning above creatures that could never understand how brief their own existence truly was within the larger story of the planet. For centuries, humans had no idea dinosaurs had ever existed. Ancient people occasionally discovered large fossil bones weathering from cliffs or buried beneath hillsides, but they interpreted them through mythology. Some believed they belonged to dragons, giants, or forgotten monsters. In a strange way, this makes sense. Dinosaur fossils do not feel entirely real even today. They seem suspended somewhere between science and imagination. It was not until the 19th century that scientists slowly began assembling the truth from scattered fragments of bone. A tooth discovered here, a vertebra there. Massive femurs hidden beneath stone older than human memory. Piece by piece, paleontologists realized that Earth had once been ruled by animals unlike anything alive today. And perhaps one of the most surprising discoveries was that dinosaurs were not evolutionary failures or primitive reptiles stumbling through ancient swamps. Many were highly adapted, intelligent in their own ways, socially complex, and astonishingly successful. They survived volcanic upheaval, shifting climates, and continental rearrangements for millions upon millions of years. Humans, by comparison, have existed for only a tiny moment. There is something quietly humbling about that realization. Modern civilization often gives the impression that humanity stands at the center of Earth's story. But dinosaurs remind us that dominance is temporary. Entire empires of life can rise, flourish, and vanish long before the universe even notices. The rocks beneath our feet contain histories so vast that human timelines begin to feel delicate and almost fragile. Among the earliest dinosaurs were relatively small creatures that appeared during the late Triassic period, around 230 million years ago. At that time, Earth's continents were still joined together in the supercontinent known as Pangaea. Much of the interior was dry and harsh, with seasonal climates and enormous deserts stretching across the landscape. The first dinosaurs did not immediately dominate the world. They lived alongside many other strange reptilian groups, competing for survival in ecosystems still recovering from the Permian mass extinction, the most catastrophic extinction event Earth has ever known. That earlier disaster wiped out perhaps 90% of marine species and radically reshaped life itself. In many ways, dinosaurs emerged from the ruins of another lost world. Some early dinosaurs were lightly built and fast-moving, standing on two legs with efficient body structures that allowed greater endurance. This upright posture became one of their great evolutionary advantages. Unlike sprawling reptiles whose limbs extended outward, dinosaur legs were positioned beneath their bodies, supporting movement with remarkable efficiency. Over time, this would allow certain species to grow to immense sizes without collapsing beneath their own weight, and size eventually became one of the defining features of the dinosaur age. The great sauropods remain among the largest land animals to ever exist. Creatures like Argentinosaurus may have reached lengths over 100 feet and weights approaching 70 tons or more. To stand beside such an animal would likely feel surreal, almost impossible for the human nervous system to fully process. Its heartbeat alone may have sounded like distant thunder. Each step would gently vibrate the ground beneath nearby plants and smaller animals. Yet, despite their scale, many giant herbivorous dinosaurs probably lived surprisingly peaceful lives. They spent much of their existence eating. A fully grown sauropod required enormous amounts of vegetation every single day just to sustain its body. Much of its life may have involved slow migration between feeding grounds, moving carefully through ancient forests while smaller creatures scattered around its feet. Some paleontologists believe herds may have traveled together for protection, including juveniles sheltered among larger adults. There is something strangely calming about imagining these colossal animals not as movie monsters, but as patient grazers wandering through warm, prehistoric mornings. Meanwhile, in other regions of the dinosaur world, evolution was experimenting with entirely different forms. Armored dinosaurs developed protective plates and tail clubs capable of delivering devastating blows. Horned ceratopsians evolved elaborate frills and facial structures that may have been used not only for defense, but also for social display and recognition. Duck-billed hadrosaurs formed massive herds and possibly communicated through resonating calls produced by hollow crests. The dinosaur age was not a single uniform world. It was a vast sequence of changing worlds layered across millions of years, each filled with unique species adapted to their particular moment in Earth's history. Some dinosaurs thrived in dense coastal forests, others crossed arid plains beneath volcanic mountains. Some hunted alone in silence. Others may have cared for nests, guarded offspring, or traveled in coordinated groups. And slowly, as paleontology advanced, another astonishing truth began to emerge from the fossils. Many dinosaurs were covered not in scales alone, but in feathers. At first, the idea seemed almost absurd to many scientists and artists. Popular images of dinosaurs for generations had portrayed them as heavy reptilian beasts with rough skin and sluggish movements, but the fossil evidence became increasingly difficult to ignore. Delicate feather impressions appeared preserved in fine-grained stone. Tiny filament structures surrounded the skeletons of small predatory species. Entire dinosaurs emerged from ancient rock with wings, plumage, and bird-like anatomy astonishingly intact. In quiet museum laboratories, under careful lights and soft brushes, the ancient boundary between dinosaurs and birds slowly dissolved. Today, scientists understand that birds are not merely descendants of dinosaurs in some distant symbolic sense. Birds are dinosaurs. The pigeons resting on city sidewalks, the owls moving silently through forests at night, the hawks circling high above highways, all carry evolutionary connections to creatures that once walked through Jurassic valleys and Cretaceous wetlands. This realization changes the emotional texture of the dinosaur story. Dinosaurs are not entirely gone. Part of their world still wakes every morning in birdsong. There is something deeply comforting about that continuity. Evolution rarely erases life completely. Instead, it transforms, reshapes, and carries fragments of ancient worlds forward into new forms. The feathers of modern birds may trace their origins to structures that first evolved for warmth, display, or sensory communication long before flight itself emerged. And flight, when it finally appeared among certain dinosaur lineages, altered the possibilities of life forever. The skies of the late dinosaur age would have been alive with movement. Some feathered dinosaurs glided between trees, while early birds experimented with powered flight above fern-covered landscapes. Giant pterosaurs, close relatives of dinosaurs though not true dinosaurs themselves, soared over coastlines with wingspans larger than small airplanes. Certain species may have crossed entire oceans on warm atmospheric currents, searching for food across enormous prehistoric distances. To imagine such scenes requires temporarily releasing the modern world from the mind. No engines, no concrete, no human language, only the sounds of insects, rainfall, distant surf, and living creatures evolving through endless generations beneath changing stars. Even the colors of the dinosaur world may have been richer than people once assumed. Fossilized pigment structures called melanosomes have allowed scientists to estimate coloration in some feathered dinosaurs. Certain species may have displayed striped tails, reddish plumage, shimmering iridescence, or contrasting patterns used for communication and courtship. This detail matters more than it first appears. For a long time, extinct animals were imagined almost as moving skeletons, gray, lifeless, simplified. But color restores a sense of living presence. It reminds us that these creatures experienced sunlight, camouflage, attraction, territorial display, and all the subtle evolutionary pressures that still shape life today. A small feathered dinosaur, standing at the edge of a mist-covered lake, may have appeared surprisingly beautiful, not monstrous, not unnatural, simply alive. And perhaps that is one of the most quietly fascinating aspects of dinosaurs. The deeper science explores them, the less alien they become. Beneath their enormous diversity, many behaviors appear strangely familiar. Fossilized nesting grounds suggest parental care in certain species. Some dinosaurs returned repeatedly to breeding areas generation after generation, much like modern birds and sea turtles. Evidence from bone beds indicates that certain herbivores traveled in herds containing individuals of different ages. One remarkable discovery in Mongolia revealed an oviraptor fossil preserved atop its nest, with arms spread protectively around its eggs, almost exactly like a modern bird brooding its young. Earlier paleontologists had misunderstood these animals entirely. The name oviraptor actually means egg thief, because scientists originally believed the animal was stealing eggs from nests nearby. Only later did they realize the nest belonged to the dinosaur itself. In this way, science often advances through humility. Ideas once spoken with confidence eventually soften beneath new evidence. The prehistoric world becomes less certain, but also more alive and nuanced. Dinosaurs cease to be simple symbols of brute force and instead emerge as complex animals shaped by the same evolutionary forces that shape every creature today. Some species may even have possessed levels of intelligence that challenge older assumptions. Troodontids, for example, had relatively large brains compared to many other dinosaurs and exceptionally keen vision. Predatory dinosaurs likely relied on sophisticated sensory awareness to survive within competitive ecosystems. Hunting required timing, coordination, memory, and adaptation. The ancient world was not static. It was filled with decisions. Every creature existed inside an endless chain of risks and responses. A change in weather patterns, a failed migration, a drying river, a predator hidden in tall vegetation. Life during the Age of Dinosaurs was beautiful, but it was never gentle for long. And yet, viewed across millions of years, there is a strange tranquility in the persistence of life itself. Forests regrew after fires. Species adapted. Rivers changed course. New ecosystems formed where older ones disappeared. Earth continued its slow turning through darkness and light, carrying entire ages silently forward. Perhaps this is one reason dinosaurs continue to fascinate the human imagination so deeply. They occupy a psychological space somewhere between memory and myth. We know they were real, Their bones remain embedded in stone across every continent. Their footprints still cross ancient sediments hardened into rock. But because no human being ever saw them alive, they also retain a dreamlike quality. They belong to a world permanently unreachable. Even the process of uncovering dinosaur fossils feels almost meditative. Paleontologists often spend years excavating a single site with extraordinary patience. Tiny tools remove grains of sediment one layer at a time. Field teams work beneath desert heat, mountain winds, or freezing conditions, searching for fragments hidden for tens of millions of years. Sometimes an entire season of excavation yields only partial bones. Sometimes a single exposed vertebra leads to one of the greatest discoveries in modern paleontology. There is a quiet lesson inside this work. The past reveals itself slowly. Understanding rarely arrives all at once. Instead, knowledge accumulates gradually through observation, revision, and persistence. A broken tooth here, a claw there. Small details separated by continents and decades eventually connect into larger truths. And still, despite everything scientists have learned, much of the dinosaur world remains mysterious. Soft tissues rarely fossilize. Behaviors disappear almost completely. Sounds vanish into time. We do not truly know what most dinosaurs looked like in motion, how their calls echoed through forests, or what rhythms governed their daily lives. Even famous species like Tyrannosaurus rex remain partly unresolved in scientific debate. Was it covered partially in feathers during certain life stages? How fast could it actually move? Did it hunt actively, scavenge opportunistically, or both? The uncertainty itself becomes part of the fascination. Ancient life exists at the edge of visibility, emerging only in fragments from deep time. And perhaps the human mind finds comfort in this mystery because it mirrors something larger about existence itself. No matter how much knowledge accumulates, the universe always remains partly hidden. There are always older layers beneath the visible surface. Far above the dinosaur world, the night sky looked almost the same as it does now. The same moon drifted over ancient coastlines. The same stars burned above Jurassic forests. Constellations slowly shifted over millions of years. But light from distant galaxies still traveled silently across space while dinosaurs slept beside rivers or moved through warm nocturnal plains. And somewhere in those ancient nights, small mammals, tiny, cautious, mostly unnoticed, waited quietly in the shadows of giants. For much of the dinosaur age, mammals remained small and vulnerable creatures, living at the edges of ecosystems dominated by larger reptiles. Many resembled shrews or nocturnal climbing animals, surviving through caution rather than strength. They moved through undergrowth beneath enormous feet, emerging mostly at night when many predators were less active. In the darkness of prehistoric forests, these early mammals listened carefully to a world ruled by giants. It is strange to imagine that human beings, whales, elephants, wolves, and every other mammal alive today descended from ancestors that once existed almost invisibly beneath the dinosaur empire. But evolution rarely announces the future. The dominant species of one era may become extinct, while small, overlooked creatures quietly inherit the next age of Earth. Survival does not always belong to the strongest. Sometimes it belongs to the adaptable, sometimes to the fortunate, sometimes simply to those present in the right place when catastrophe arrives. And catastrophe eventually did arrive. Near the end of the Cretaceous period, around 66 million years ago, the world changed with terrifying suddenness. An asteroid roughly the size of a mountain struck near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in modern-day Mexico. The energy released exceeded anything humans have ever experienced. Forests ignited across enormous distances. Shockwaves traveled through the crust of the planet itself. Molten debris rained back through the atmosphere, heating the sky with catastrophic intensity. The impact marked the beginning of one of Earth's great extinction events. But what makes this event especially haunting is that the dinosaurs had already survived for an incomprehensibly long time before it occurred. For over 160 million years, they adapted successfully to changing climates, volcanic activity, shifting oceans, and evolutionary competition. Entire dynasties of species rose and vanished during their reign. The asteroid was not simply the end of a brief experiment. It interrupted one of the most successful chapters in the history of complex life. After the impact, sunlight dimmed beneath atmospheric dust and soot. Temperatures fluctuated violently. Food chains collapsed. Plants died in many regions as photosynthesis failed beneath darkened skies. Large animals requiring enormous amounts of energy became increasingly vulnerable. And gradually, over years and decades rather than a single instant, most dinosaur species disappeared forever. There is something emotionally powerful about imagining those final generations, a herd moving through landscapes already beginning to fail, predators searching for prey that no longer appears, ancient migration routes leading toward emptier horizons, the world itself becoming unfamiliar. Yet extinction, while tragic from a human perspective, is also deeply woven into the history of life. More than 99% of all species that have ever existed are now gone. Entire branches of evolution bloom for millions of years before fading into silence. Dinosaurs were not singled out by nature for failure. In fact, their extraordinary longevity makes them among the greatest survivors Earth has ever produced. And even in extinction, they transformed the future. With the disappearance of most large dinosaurs, ecological space opened across the planet. Mammals diversified rapidly into forms that had previously been impossible under dinosaur dominance. Over immense stretches of time, primates evolved. Eventually, human beings emerged, creatures capable of studying the fossils of worlds that vanished long before their own existence. In this sense, the dinosaur story is also part of the human story. Without that ancient asteroid, mammals may never have risen to prominence at all. Perhaps one of the most relaxing aspects of paleontology is the perspective it offers. Modern human anxieties often feel enormous while we are inside them. Deadlines, conflicts, ambitions, fears. Yet deep time changes the scale of thought. It reminds us that Earth has passed through countless transformations before humanity appeared, and will continue long after our own civilizations fade. The rocks are patient, the oceans are patient, the stars are patient. Dinosaurs lived entire evolutionary ages beneath skies untouched by human memory. And now their remains rest quietly beneath deserts, cliffs, river valleys, and polar ice. Some fossils still wait undiscovered beneath layers of stone no human has ever excavated. Entire species may remain hidden forever. There is a peaceful mystery in that incompleteness. Even now, scientists continue uncovering astonishing discoveries. New dinosaur species are identified almost every year. In some regions, paleontologists have found evidence of preserved skin textures, stomach contents, footprints showing group behavior, and even proteins surviving in exceptionally rare fossils. Advanced imaging technologies reveal microscopic structures once invisible to earlier generations of researchers. The ancient world keeps speaking softly through stone. One especially beautiful type of fossil evidence comes not from bones, but from footprints across ancient mudflats preserved into rock. Dinosaur tracks still cross landscapes frozen in time. A small predator following larger herbivores along a shoreline, herds moving together through soft sediment. Solitary animals walking beside rivers millions of years before humans existed. These footprints feel strangely intimate. Bones tell us what dinosaurs were. Tracks hint at what they did. A footprint captures a moment, an actual instant of living movement preserved across geological ages. Some trackways even suggest behavior difficult to detect elsewhere. Parallel sets of prints imply coordinated group travel. Juvenile tracks mixed among larger adults hint at social structures. Certain predator tracks show changes in stride length that may indicate acceleration during pursuit. And then there are the quiet tracks. Single lines of footprints crossing empty prehistoric beaches toward vanished waterlines. One animal moving alone through the ancient world beneath open skies. No dramatic battle, no catastrophe. Just a creature walking across soft earth while sunlight reflected from distant waves. For reasons difficult to fully explain, these traces often affect people emotionally more than skeletons do, perhaps because footprints feel immediate. A skeleton belongs to death, but a footprint belongs to life continuing forward. Dinosaurs also experienced seasons much as modern animals do. Some polar dinosaur fossils discovered in regions that are now Australia and Antarctica suggest certain species survived long periods of winter darkness near the poles. During the dinosaur age, these regions were warmer than today, but still experienced dramatic seasonal light cycles. Imagine feathered dinosaurs moving through ancient polar forests beneath months of dim twilight. Snow may have fallen softly through conifer branches while herds searched for food in cold silence. Juveniles huddled together for warmth. Predators moved carefully across frozen ground beside rivers steaming faintly in winter air. The dinosaur world was not only tropical jungles and volcanic swamps. It contained deserts, floodplains, mountain valleys, coastlines, and forests stretching into polar darkness. It was as ecologically varied and dynamic as the modern Earth itself, and throughout all those environments, life continued its endless experimentation with form and behavior. Some dinosaurs evolved elaborate crests larger than human heads, others developed armored tails, sail-like backs, or astonishing neck lengths. Evolution produced giants and tiny hunters, fast runners and slow-moving grazers, creatures adapted for digging, swimming, gliding, or crushing bone. The prehistoric world was filled with biological imagination, far beyond what human fiction could easily invent. And perhaps most astonishing of all, much of it actually happened. In museums late at night, after visitors have gone home and the halls fall quiet beneath dim security lights, dinosaur skeletons often appear almost suspended outside normal time. Their enormous rib cages cast long shadows across polished floors. Curving vertebrae rise like ancient architecture. Thin claws remain frozen in gestures completed tens of millions of years ago. There is something deeply still about fossils, not empty but still. A fossil is both absence and presence at the same time. The living creature is gone forever, yet evidence of its existence remains embedded within the earth itself, patiently waiting for minds capable of recognizing what it means. Stone becomes memory, bone becomes narrative. Entire vanished worlds survive through mineral traces hidden beneath layers of sediment. And remarkably, many of the most important dinosaur discoveries have occurred almost by accident. A rancher notices unusual shapes eroding from a hillside. A child walking outdoors spots a fragment of bone protruding from rock. Heavy rainfall exposes ancient layers that remained hidden for millions of years. Beneath ordinary landscapes, deep time quietly waits. In the Badlands of North America, entire skeletons emerge from cliffs striped with geological history. In the Gobi Desert, paleontologists search wind-swept dunes where fossils dry beneath open skies. In Patagonia, enormous bones weather slowly from remote rock formations shaped by wind and silence. Even Antarctica, now covered in ice and cold darkness, contains fossils from ecosystems that existed when dinosaurs wandered ancient forests near the southern pole. The Earth remembers more than humans often realize. Every layer of rock is a kind of archive written without words. Sediments record floods, droughts, volcanic eruptions, extinctions, migrations, and climate shifts unfolding across immense spans of time. Paleontologists learn to read these layers almost like historians studying ancient manuscripts. The color of stone, the minerals present, the arrangement of fossils within sediment, each detail offers clues about vanished environments. A single fossilized leaf beside dinosaur bones may reveal ancient temperatures. Tiny grains of pollen can reconstruct entire ecosystems. Chemical signatures preserved in teeth sometimes hint at migration patterns or diets followed millions of years ago. Science, in this way, becomes a quiet conversation with worlds that can no longer speak directly. And the more researchers learn, the more complex dinosaurs become. For much of the 20th century, popular culture often portrayed them as slow, cold-blooded reptiles driven mostly by instinct. But modern paleontology paints a very different picture. Many dinosaurs likely possessed high metabolic activity, active social lives, and dynamic behaviors more comparable to modern birds and mammals than older reptilian stereotypes. Some may have cared extensively for their young. Others likely performed visual displays using feathers, coloration, movement, or vocalization. Certain species probably migrated seasonally across enormous distances following food and climate patterns. The prehistoric world may have been filled with sounds stranger than anything alive today. Deep resonating calls echoing through forests, low-frequency vibrations traveling across floodplains, sharp warning cries among feathered hunters, the rustling movement of giant herds passing through dense vegetation. Because soft tissues rarely fossilize, scientists can only estimate many dinosaur sounds by studying skull anatomy and comparisons with living relatives like birds and crocodilians. But some hadrosaurs possessed long, hollow crests connected to nasal passages that may have functioned almost like natural musical instruments. Computer models suggest they could produce haunting, resonant tones capable of traveling long distances. It is possible that certain prehistoric valleys once echoed with calls unlike anything the human ear has ever heard, and through all of this, the night sky remained constant above them. Meteor showers crossed ancient atmospheres. Lunar eclipses darkened prehistoric moons. Storm systems moved across continents no human would ever see. Dinosaurs experienced weather, sunlight, exhaustion, injury, hunger, curiosity, and fear. Their world was ancient, but it was still immediate to them. Each creature lived inside the narrow window of the present moment, unaware that future intelligent beings would someday reconstruct fragments of their existence from buried stone. Perhaps this is another reason dinosaurs feel emotionally significant to people. They remind us that all living things, no matter how enormous or successful, exist temporarily within larger systems beyond their control. Species rise and disappear, continents drift, stars evolve. Even the most dominant forms of life eventually become part of history. Yet this realization does not necessarily feel sad. In many ways, it creates a strange appreciation for existence itself. Dinosaurs were real. Against overwhelming cosmic odds, these extraordinary animals truly walked across Earth for millions of years beneath rainstorms, sunsets, and constellations. They raised young, searched for food, migrated through changing seasons, survived injuries, and adapted to landscapes now vanished. Their lives mattered within the ecosystems they inhabited, even if the universe itself remained silent around them. And now, through science and imagination together, humans have become the species capable of remembering them. There is something profoundly beautiful about that continuity of awareness across time. In some fossil sites, entire dinosaur communities appear preserved together by sudden disasters. Floods buried herds beneath mud. Volcanic ash froze ecosystems in astonishing detail. River systems carried bones into ancient channels where sediments slowly protected them from decay. One famous site in Alberta, Canada, contains thousands of fossils from a massive group of horned dinosaurs called Centrosaurus. Scientists believe a catastrophic flood may have overwhelmed an enormous migrating herd, preserving individuals of many different ages together in stone. Young animals, mature adults, and aging members of the herd all became part of the same geological moment. These mass fossil beds reveal something deeply ancient about survival through community. Many dinosaurs likely depended on collective behavior for protection and migration. Herd movement reduced predator risk. Group nesting increased offspring survival. Shared awareness improved chances of detecting danger across vast landscapes, even across millions of years. Certain biological strategies remain familiar. Life repeatedly discovers cooperation. And not all dinosaurs were giants. Some feathered species were smaller than modern chickens, moving quickly through underbrush hunting insects or small prey. Tiny dinosaurs perched in trees, glided between branches, or nested among dense vegetation. The Age of Dinosaurs was not only an age of scale, it was also an age of remarkable diversity. If a human observer could somehow stand safely within a late Cretaceous ecosystem, the experience would likely feel overwhelming in subtle ways rather than constant violence. Insects would hum loudly in humid air, dense plant life would release unfamiliar scents, strange bird-like calls would echo through forests filled with cycads and flowering plants, just beginning to spread across the world. And everywhere, There would be movement, small creatures beneath leaves, distant shapes crossing open plains, wings overhead, ripples moving through river water. The prehistoric world was alive with detail. Modern films often compress dinosaurs into non-stop action and conflict, but real ecosystems spend much of their time in quieter rhythms. Animals rest, feed, wait, travel, sleep. Most living creatures avoid unnecessary danger whenever possible because survival depends on conserving energy and avoiding injury. A Tyrannosaurus may have spent long hours simply walking through its territory beneath afternoon sunlight, following scent trails carried on warm wind. A herd of sauropods may have stood silently near shallow water at dusk, while insects drifted through reeds around their enormous legs. Feathered juveniles may have slept beneath protective adults during cold nights beside ancient forests. And above them all, stars slowly crossed the prehistoric sky, exactly as they do tonight. If one could travel back into those ancient nights, perhaps the first surprise would not be the size of the dinosaurs, but the silence between their movements. The prehistoric world was not constantly roaring. Real ecosystems rarely are. There would have been long intervals of stillness broken only by distant calls, rustling vegetation, flowing water, or the slow rhythm of insects hidden beneath giant leaves. Moonlight would gather softly along the backs of sleeping herds. Mist would rise from warm rivers before dawn. Predators would move carefully through darkness, not because they were monstrous, but because energy mattered. Every injury carried risk. Every hunt required calculation. Survival depended less on aggression than on balance. This quieter vision of the dinosaur world feels more believable the longer one studies nature itself. Modern animals spend much of their lives resting, observing, or conserving strength. Even the most powerful predators often fail during hunts. Lions sleep for long stretches beneath heat. Wolves travel patiently for miles before opportunities appear. Birds remain motionless for astonishing periods while listening to their surroundings. Dinosaurs, despite their scale and strangeness, were still part of this same ancient logic of life. And perhaps nowhere is this more visible than in the fossilized evidence of growth itself. When scientists slice thin sections from dinosaur bones and study them under microscopes, they sometimes find growth rings similar to those inside trees. These rings preserve patterns of seasonal development, periods of stress, abundance, and maturity. Through bone tissue, paleontologists can estimate how quickly dinosaurs grew and how their bodies changed through life. Some species experienced astonishing growth rates. A young sauropod may have gained several pounds every single day for years, transforming from a vulnerable hatchling into one of the largest land animals in Earth's history. Tyrannosaurs also appear to have undergone dramatic teenage growth spurts, rapidly building muscle and size before reaching adulthood. There is something fascinating about imagining such transformations unfolding gradually across prehistoric seasons, a hatchling breaking through its shell beneath humid vegetation, a juvenile navigating dangers hidden within giant ecosystems, an adult eventually towering above landscapes once filled with threats. Dinosaurs were not born gigantic. Even the largest species began life astonishingly small compared to their adult forms. Some sauropod eggs were only about the size of modern footballs, despite producing animals that would someday weigh dozens of tons. This created a strange biological contrast. Enormous adults emerging from fragile beginnings, and many never survived long enough to grow large at all. Ancient life was filled with uncertainty. Eggs were vulnerable to predators, flooding, temperature shifts, and disease. Juveniles faced constant risks from carnivores and environmental hardship. Mortality rates among young dinosaurs were likely extremely high, much as they are in many modern species today. But evolution operates through immense numbers and immense patience. Over millions of years, survival strategies refine themselves generation by generation. Small advantages accumulate slowly. A slightly stronger limb structure, better camouflage, more efficient breathing, improved parental behavior, tiny biological adjustments repeated across geological time eventually produce extraordinary results. The dinosaur age itself was shaped by this slow accumulation of change. No single moment transformed small early dinosaurs into the immense diversity of later periods. Instead, countless generations adapted gradually to shifting environments. Forests changed, climate patterns drifted, oceans advanced and retreated. Evolution responded continuously, almost invisibly, through time spans too vast for human intuition. Human beings often think in years or decades. Earth thinks in millions of years. And this difference in scale changes the emotional atmosphere of paleontology. Dinosaurs encourage a slower form of thinking. They invite the mind away from immediate urgency and toward deeper continuity. Entire species emerged, flourished, and disappeared while mountains eroded grain by grain beneath ancient rain. Even extinction itself sometimes unfolded slowly. Certain dinosaur groups were already changing before the asteroid impact occurred. Ecosystems shifted alongside volcanic activity and long-term climate fluctuations. Some species adapted successfully while others declined. The prehistoric world was dynamic right until the very end of the Cretaceous. Then came the asteroid, a brief moment of cosmic violence, interrupting millions of years of evolutionary continuity. Scientists estimate the impact released energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs. The collision excavated a crater over 100 miles wide. Tsunamis spread across ancient coastlines. Wildfires may have ignited across continents. Dust and aerosols entered the atmosphere, disrupting climate systems on a planetary scale. And yet even here there is a strange stillness hidden inside the science, because after catastrophe came silence, ash settling slowly onto empty landscapes, forests darkened beneath cooling skies, the familiar sounds of ancient ecosystems gradually fading away. No living Tyrannosaurus ever understood extinction was happening. No Triceratops recognized it was among the final generations of its kind. Life continued moment by moment, even as larger systems collapsed around it. There is something profoundly human in that idea. Most creatures experience existence through immediate realities, rather than abstract history. Hunger, shelter, weather, movement, companionship. Dinosaurs did not know they were part of a magnificent lost age any more than humans fully understand the era they themselves inhabit now. Perhaps millions of years from today, if intelligent beings still study the Earth, human civilization may also appear as a thin geological layer filled with traces, fragments, and unanswered questions. This perspective can feel unsettling at first, but it can also feel peaceful. The dinosaur story reminds us that existence is larger than any single species. Life continues changing, adapting, and reinventing itself across unimaginable spans of time. Even extinction creates openings for new forms to emerge. Forests regrow, oceans refill with life. Evolution begins again in different directions, and remarkably, traces of the dinosaur age still surround us constantly. Birds remain the most visible example, but there are others. Flowering plants that spread during the late dinosaur era still dominate modern ecosystems. Crocodilians preserve body plans similar to ancient relatives that lived beside dinosaurs millions of years ago. Certain insects, sharks, horseshoe crabs, and marine organisms retain evolutionary lineages reaching astonishingly deep into Earth's history. When rain falls onto modern forests, it touches descendants of prehistoric worlds. Sometimes, during thunderstorms in heavily wooded places, one can almost imagine how ancient Earth may have sounded. Wind moving through dense foliage, water striking enormous leaves, distant animal calls echoing through darkness. The atmosphere itself carrying scents of wet vegetation and soil, not identical of course, but connected, because the modern world did not replace the prehistoric world completely. It emerged from it. Every living ecosystem carries remnants of older ages layered beneath the surface of the present. And this continuity becomes especially visible in the evolution of feathers and flight. Some small feathered dinosaurs likely used primitive wings first for balance, insulation, display, or gliding, before true powered flight fully developed. Evolution often repurposes existing structures for entirely new functions over time. Feathers that once retained warmth eventually carried descendants into the sky. The process itself was gradual and experimental. Nature does not design with final goals in mind. It explores possibilities endlessly through variation and survival. Some evolutionary paths vanish quickly. Others reshape the future of life forever. And somewhere in the warm forests of the Jurassic or Cretaceous, small feathered creatures began making short leaps into the air beneath trees illuminated by ancient sunlight. In those first moments of flight, if they can even be called flight in the modern sense, the world would not have looked like a conquest of the sky. It would have looked like hesitation becoming possibility, a small feathered dinosaur pushing off a branch, a brief glide between trunks, a landing that was not yet controlled, not yet refined, but enough to survive another day. Evolution rarely moves in straight lines. It moves through trial, repetition, and countless near failures that never fossilize. What we now recognize as birdsong, wings, and aerial grace began as something far more uncertain. The air itself was not a domain to be conquered. It was simply another medium to experiment with, like water or soil or forest floor. Over time, those experiments accumulated. Bones became lighter, feathers became more structured, muscles adapted for sustained lift, and eventually, the sky became a permanent home for an entire branch of dinosaur life that never truly left the Earth, only changed how it moved across it. Yet even as some dinosaurs explored the air, most remained firmly grounded, continuing their slow rhythms across continents shaped by deep time. The late Cretaceous world was not a fading world in its own perception. It was still fully alive, still evolving, still expanding in complexity. Flowering plants were spreading more widely, transforming landscapes with new colors and new ecological relationships. Insects diversified alongside them. Pollination networks began to resemble the intricate systems we see today. Dinosaurs lived within this changing botanical world without knowing it was becoming something closer to modern Earth. A hadrosaur feeding among flowering shrubs would not have understood it was witnessing one of the most important botanical revolutions in planetary history. A small theropod moving through undergrowth would not have realized that the plants around it represented a relatively new chapter in Earth's long evolutionary story. Everything was simply environment. Everything was simply now. And yet, beneath this apparent stability, Earth itself was always in motion. Continents continued drifting, slowly reshaping ocean currents and climate patterns. Mountain ranges rose gradually over millions of years. Sea levels shifted in response to ice formation and melting far from the equator. Even the chemistry of the atmosphere evolved subtly over time. Influenced by volcanic activity and biological processes, dinosaurs lived through all of this change without any concept of geological time. They experienced only seasons, migrations, cycles of growth and scarcity. This is one of the quiet truths of prehistoric life. No creature perceives the vastness of the world it inhabits. A tree does not understand the forest. A river does not understand the basin. A species does not understand evolution. It only participates in it, moment by moment, generation by generation. Fossils give us the rare ability to step outside that limitation. They allow a kind of retrospective vision, where millions of years can be seen at once, compressed into layers of stone and pattern. In this view, extinction is not a sudden rupture, but a transition embedded within deeper continuity. Even mass extinction events, as catastrophic as they are, function more like resets in Earth's long biological experiment than absolute endings. After the asteroid impact, for example, the world did not remain empty. It began again, slowly at first. Then, with increasing complexity, mammals diversified into new ecological roles. Birds expanded into habitats once occupied by non-avian dinosaurs. Plants reorganized into modern ecosystems. Oceans repopulated with evolving marine life. Over tens of millions of years, Earth rebuilt its living surface using the remaining threads of ancient biology. The dinosaur age ended, but its consequences continued unfolding. In a sense, we still live inside its aftermath. Every modern ecosystem carries structural echoes of that lost world. Forests still contain evolutionary descendants of plants that coexisted with dinosaurs. Atmospheric oxygen levels and climate systems continue to reflect long-term geological processes shaped during that era. Even human curiosity about dinosaurs itself is part of the legacy they left behind. We study them because they were here, and because their absence is still felt in the shape of the natural world. There is also something quietly philosophical in the way dinosaurs challenge human assumptions about permanence. They remind us that dominance is not stability. Size is not protection. Success is not immunity to change. The most powerful creatures in Earth's history still yielded to forces beyond their control, not through weakness, but through the structure of existence itself. Everything that lives is temporary, yet within that temporariness, life finds endless variation. This is why dinosaur fossils often evoke a particular kind of stillness in people who encounter them in person. Standing before a mounted skeleton is not simply an encounter with anatomy, it is an encounter with absence shaped into form, a presence reconstructed from disappearance. In that stillness, imagination becomes almost unavoidable. One begins to fill in the gaps automatically. Muscle over bone, skin over structure, movement over silence. And suddenly, the fossil is no longer just an object. It becomes a suggestion of motion that once existed in real time, a creature that walked, breathed, and interacted with a world long gone. This blending of science and imagination is not a weakness in understanding. It is part of how humans connect with deep time. Fossils provide the evidence. Imagination restores the continuity. Together, they create a bridge across millions of years. And perhaps that is why dinosaur narratives feel so emotionally resonant, even in calm, reflective moments. They are not just about extinction or ancient biology. They are about the scale of life itself. The idea that existence stretches far beyond individual experience, beyond memory, beyond culture, beyond anything a single species can fully comprehend in its lifetime. Even now, new discoveries continue to refine this understanding. Occasionally, paleontologists uncover species that reshape previous assumptions entirely. A new feathered dinosaur that blurs the boundary between bird and non-bird. A predator with unexpected anatomical features suggesting different hunting strategies. A herbivore with evidence of complex social behavior previously unrecognized in its group. Each discovery is a reminder that the dinosaur world was far more intricate than any single narrative can capture. It was not a simple age of giants. It was a vast evolutionary tapestry woven across continents and climates, filled with endless variation and adaptation, and somewhere within that tapestry, small details remain forever unknown. The exact sounds of certain species, the full range of their colors, the subtle social interactions that left no trace in stone, the quiet daily moments that made up most of their lives. Those moments are gone, but not erased. They survive indirectly, encoded in biology, in descendants, in ecosystems, and in the scientific stories we continue to refine. And above all, they survive in the simple fact that Earth once sustained them for longer than it has sustained us so far. A reminder, gentle and unintentional, that time is larger than any single chapter within it. There is a particular kind of calm that comes from imagining time at this scale, where entire worlds rise and settle without urgency, and where change is not an event but a constant condition of existence. In that perspective, dinosaurs are not a distant spectacle of extinction, but part of a continuous unfolding of Earth's life story. One chapter among many, written slowly, erased slowly, and rewritten again in new forms. Even the idea of ancient begins to soften when viewed through deep time. The word suggests distance, but geology suggests continuity. The ground beneath us does not divide past and present so much as connect them. Every landscape is layered with previous landscapes, like overlapping memories compressed into stone. A forest growing today may rest above sediments that once held rivers flowing beside dinosaurs. A desert may cover what was once a humid floodplain filled with cycads and fern forests. Mountains may conceal ecosystems that existed before mammals even diversified. Nothing is entirely gone. It is only rearranged. In this sense, Paleontology is less about looking backward and more about learning to see downward, into layers where time has been folded rather than erased. And yet, even with this continuity, there remains an undeniable sense of mystery around dinosaurs that no amount of scientific progress fully dissolves. Part of this comes from the limits of preservation. Fossils capture structure, but rarely behavior. They preserve bones, but not thought. They preserve form, but not experience. The inner life of a dinosaur, the way it perceived light, sound, danger, or companionship, remains forever inaccessible. We can infer, we can reconstruct, we can simulate possibilities, but we cannot fully recover the moment-to-moment reality of their existence. This gap between evidence and experience creates a quiet space where imagination naturally settles. It is not fantasy in opposition to science, but imagination guided by it, hovering carefully around what is known, while acknowledging what is not. And perhaps this is why dinosaurs feel strangely peaceful to think about at night. They exist in a balance between certainty and uncertainty, between knowledge and silence. They are understood enough to feel real, but incomplete enough to remain open. In that openness, the mind slows down, attention softens, thought becomes less linear and more observational. A mental landscape forms where information does not demand reaction, only contemplation. The dinosaur world itself may have been shaped by similar rhythms of attention, though not in the human sense. Survival required constant awareness, but not constant stress. Many animals today demonstrate a state of alert calm, a readiness without panic, a sensitivity without overwhelm. It is likely that dinosaurs too lived within such neurological rhythms, where long periods of stillness were punctuated by moments of decisive action. A predator does not hunt continuously. A herd does not flee continuously. Life is mostly intervals. Even in the most dynamic ecosystems, stillness occupies the majority of time. This realization shifts how we imagine prehistoric Earth. Instead of a constantly chaotic battlefield, it becomes a layered environment of overlapping quiet moments. Wind moving through ancient conifers, water tracing slow paths across stone, distant movement at the edges of vision, the soft pressure of survival unfolding gradually, without spectacle. And within those quiet systems, evolutionary change continued its slow work. Feathers refined, skulls reshaped, digestive systems adapted to new plant forms, sensory organs tuned to shifting environments. Each modification small on its own, but transformative across thousands of generations. Dinosaurs did not evolve toward an endpoint. They evolved through necessity, responding to immediate conditions without awareness of long-term outcomes. What appears, from our perspective, as grand narrative was experienced by them only as present adaptation. This difference in perspective is one of the most important insights paleontology offers. It suggests that large-scale patterns are often invisible from within the systems that produce them. A single dinosaur never experienced the age of dinosaurs. It experienced only its own brief life within that age. In the same way, humans do not experience the age of humans as a completed story. We experience only its unfolding present. This parallel creates a subtle connection across time. It suggests that awareness is always local, always immediate, always partial. Even the most intelligent species perceive only fragments of the larger structure they inhabit, and yet, those fragments are enough to build understanding, enough to reconstruct lost worlds, enough to recognize patterns stretching across millions of years. In modern laboratories, this reconstruction continues in increasingly precise ways. High-resolution scanning allows fossils to be studied without damaging them. Isotopic analysis reveals ancient diets and migration patterns. Biomechanical modeling reconstructs movement and posture. Even computer simulations attempt to estimate how dinosaurs may have interacted within ecosystems. Each tool adds another layer of clarity, but none replace the foundational silence of the fossils themselves. Because at the center of all this knowledge remains the same truth: These were living beings who no longer exist in any direct form. Their world is gone, yet their influence remains embedded in the structure of life that followed. Birds still carry their lineage. Plants that coexisted with them still shape modern forests. Soil chemistry still reflects ancient biological processes. And the continents they walked upon continue to drift, slowly reshaping environments in ways they once experienced only in gradual motion. Even the concept of extinction, when considered deeply, becomes less an ending and more a transformation of presence. Dinosaurs did not vanish into nothingness. They transitioned into fossil, into lineage, into ecological consequence, into scientific understanding, and into cultural memory. They became layered into the earth itself. And in that layering, something unusual occurs in human perception. The past stops feeling like a separate place. It becomes integrated into the present environment. The ground is no longer just ground. It becomes accumulated time. When one stands in a modern field or forest, it is possible, just for a moment, to imagine the invisible depth beneath it. Not as metaphor, but as physical reality. Beneath soil and rock lies an archive that extends far beyond human history, far beyond recorded civilization, far beyond memory itself. Dinosaurs exist within that archive not as symbols, but as traces, and those traces continue to shape scientific curiosity in the present. Every new fossil discovery carries the same quiet excitement, that there is still more to learn, still more to understand, still more to reconstruct from fragments scattered across time. In this ongoing process, science does not close the story of dinosaurs. It slowly opens it further. Each layer of understanding reveals additional complexity, additional nuance, additional questions that were not previously visible. And so the ancient world remains active in a strange way, not physically alive, but intellectually and imaginatively ongoing. It continues to evolve inside human thought. And perhaps that is the final, quiet irony of dinosaur existence. A species long gone from Earth continues to grow within the minds of a species that came much later, not through survival in flesh, but through survival in understanding. And as the mind lingers on that idea, time itself begins to feel less like a line moving forward, and more like a deep, layered field where everything that has ever happened still exists in some form, waiting to be seen from the right angle. When thinking about dinosaurs through this layered sense of time, it becomes easier to understand why their world feels so emotionally distant, yet strangely intimate at the same time. They exist beyond memory, beyond culture, beyond any inherited human experience, and yet they are reconstructed with such detail that they feel almost familiar. This tension between distance and closeness is where much of the fascination quietly lives. In a sense, dinosaurs occupy a unique position in human understanding. They are known through science, but imagined through perception. They are measured through fossils, but experienced through narrative. Every reconstruction is an interpretation built from fragments, and every fragment carries the weight of vast absence. And still, that absence is not empty. It is structured, it has shape, it has limits. A fossil bone does not tell everything, but it does not tell nothing either. It defines what is possible to know, and in doing so, it also defines what remains unknowable. Within that boundary, imagination does not drift freely. It follows the contours of evidence, like water moving through carved stone. This is why paleontology often feels less like invention and more like careful listening. The Earth is not silent. It speaks in sediment layers, in mineral patterns, in preserved impressions of life that once moved through ancient air. Even a single footprint preserved in rock can contain an entire moment of existence. Weight pressing into soft ground, muscles engaged in motion, balance shifting forward, the brief contact between life and earth before the next step carried it onward. That moment, though fleeting in real time, becomes permanent in geological time, and permanence in geology is not stillness. It is persistence through transformation. The shape remains while the material changes. The moment remains while everything around it disappears. Dinosaurs, in this way, are not frozen relics. They are preserved processes. They represent motion that has been converted into structure, behavior translated into stone, and as scientists continue to study them, new details constantly reshape the overall picture. Species once thought to be solitary are reinterpreted as potentially social. Animals once assumed to be slow are reconsidered as capable of surprising speed. Creatures once imagined as dull gray reptiles are increasingly understood as complex organisms that likely lived in visually rich and behaviorally intricate worlds. Even the concept of intelligence among dinosaurs is no longer simple. While none reached the cognitive complexity of modern humans, some species show anatomical evidence of advanced sensory processing. Enlarged brain regions in certain theropods suggest refined perception, coordination, and possibly problem-solving abilities. These traits did not exist in isolation. They were embedded in survival strategies shaped by competition, environment, and evolutionary pressure. Yet intelligence in prehistoric ecosystems did not define dominance in the way humans often assume. Success was not determined solely by cognition, but by adaptation as a whole system. Body structure, reproduction, behavior, environment, and chance. In that sense, dinosaurs were not progressing toward a single ideal form. They were diversifying outward in many directions at once. Some became enormous, some remained small, some developed armor, some developed speed, some became specialized hunters, some became gentle herbivores moving in vast herds. This diversity suggests a world not moving toward simplicity, but toward complexity. And complexity, in ecological terms, is often fragile because the more interconnected a system becomes, the more sensitive it can be to sudden disruption. This brings us again, quietly, to the asteroid impact, not as a dramatic ending, but as a structural shift in Earth's biological network. It was not merely destruction. It was reorganization on a planetary scale, a sudden interruption that removed certain dominant patterns and allowed others to expand. In the aftermath, ecosystems did not simply recover. They reassembled. New relationships formed between surviving species. Environmental niches were reoccupied in different ways. Life continued, but along altered trajectories, and from those trajectories, entirely new branches of existence eventually emerged. Mammals, once small and nocturnal, diversified into forms that would later include whales, elephants, bats, primates, and eventually humans. Birds expanded into nearly every environment on Earth. Marine life evolved in oceans reshaped by changing chemistry and temperature. Plant life continued its long partnership with climate, soil, and atmospheric cycles. The dinosaur age, though ended, became the foundation for what followed. In this sense, extinction is not only disappearance, it is also reconfiguration, a clearing of space within the structure of life that allows new forms to arise. This idea can be unsettling at first, because it challenges the instinctive human desire for permanence. But it can also be strangely grounding. It suggests that life is not fragile in the sense of being easily erased, but dynamic in the sense of constantly transforming. Nothing persists unchanged, but something always persists. Even the most complete extinction events on Earth did not end life itself. They ended configurations of life, while preserving the underlying capacity for life to reorganize. And dinosaurs, as one of the most successful and long-lasting groups in Earth's history, demonstrate this principle more than almost any other. They did not fail evolutionarily. They were part of an evolutionary sequence that reached its natural conclusion under changing conditions. Their disappearance does not diminish their success. It defines its scale, because only something truly widespread, adaptable, and long-lived can leave behind such a profound fossil record across every continent. Even today, new discoveries continue to emerge from unexpected places. Remote cliffs, deep caves, desert basins, and frozen terrains still reveal fragments of a world that once seemed almost entirely lost. Each discovery slightly adjusts the boundaries of what is known. And yet, despite all this accumulation of knowledge, dinosaurs remain partially out of reach, not because of a lack of evidence, but because of the nature of evidence itself. Science can reconstruct structure, probability, and pattern. It can estimate behavior, environment, and evolution, but it cannot fully reconstruct subjective experience. The inner life of a dinosaur remains inaccessible. What did it feel like to move through ancient forests? How did light appear through prehistoric atmospheres? What emotions, if any, structured their perception of survival, territory, or companionship? These questions remain open not due to lack of effort, but due to the limits of physical preservation. And within those limits, something quietly important emerges. Mystery is not a gap in knowledge. It is a boundary that defines the shape of understanding. Without mystery, there would be no direction for discovery. And so dinosaurs exist at a perfect intersection of knowledge and unknowability, where science is constantly expanding but never fully closing the distance. Perhaps this is why they remain so present in human thought, even after more than a century of intensive study. They are not solved, they are not finished, they are not fully contained within explanation. They remain open, and anything that remains open continues to invite attention, even in stillness, even across millions of years. In the quiet continuation of that openness, dinosaurs begin to feel less like subjects of study and more like participants in an ongoing conversation between Earth and human understanding. They are not simply the past, but a way of perceiving time itself, slower, deeper, layered with meaning that resists compression into simple narratives. When scientists reconstruct a dinosaur ecosystem, they are not only identifying species, they are rebuilding relationships that once governed entire landscapes. Predator and prey interactions, plant growth cycles, migration routes shaped by rainfall patterns that no longer exist. Even the position of rivers, coastlines, and inland seas must be inferred from geological traces that have shifted beyond recognition. In this sense, each reconstructed prehistoric scene is an act of careful imagination grounded in constraint. It is a model, but also a translation. A language built from bone, stone, and chemistry, attempting to describe something that once lived in motion. And yet, despite this abstraction, the results feel surprisingly vivid. A herd of hadrosaurs moving through a wetland at dusk. A solitary theropod pausing at the edge of a river, watching reflections ripple across ancient water. Small feathered dinosaurs shifting between branches in early flowering forests, where insects hum through humid air. These images are not invented freely. They are assembled from countless fragments of evidence, each one narrowing the range of possibility until only certain forms remain plausible. This careful narrowing is what gives paleontology its quiet authority. It does not claim to resurrect the past. It reconstructs probability within the limits of surviving data, and in doing so it reveals something important about all life on Earth. How much of existence is shaped not by certainty, but by conditions: temperature, atmosphere, gravity, available energy, ecological pressure, random mutation. None of these forces are visible in isolation. Yet together they shape every living form that has ever existed, including dinosaurs. A long-necked sauropod is not simply a strange animal. It is a solution to a set of environmental conditions that no longer exist in the same combination today. Its immense size, slow metabolism, and feeding strategy reflect an ecosystem structured around abundant vegetation and vast open spaces. A different world produces different bodies. This is one of the most profound lessons embedded in deep time. Form is not fixed. It is negotiated continuously between life and environment. And when environments change dramatically, life either adapts, migrates, transforms, or disappears. The dinosaur age contains countless examples of this negotiation across millions of years. Periods of relative stability allowed long evolutionary development. Periods of disruption triggered rapid change. Volcanic activity, shifting sea levels, and climate fluctuations repeatedly reshaped ecosystems long before the asteroid impact ever occurred. The final extinction event is often emphasized because of its suddenness. But in geological terms, it is part of a much longer pattern of change. Earth is not stable, it is dynamic, and life is not separate from that dynamism. It is one of its expressions. Even the most familiar modern landscapes are temporary configurations of ancient processes. Soil is the product of long biological and geological interaction. Rivers carve paths that continuously evolve, forests emerge, mature, and eventually give way to new growth cycles. Nothing remains static when viewed across sufficient time. Dinosaurs lived entirely within this shifting reality, without any external perspective on it. They did not observe change as a concept. They experienced it as environment. Rainfall patterns determined migration. Temperature shifts influenced reproduction. Vegetation changes altered survival strategies. Every aspect of existence was directly tied to immediate ecological conditions. And yet, despite this constant flux, there is evidence that some dinosaur species achieved remarkable long-term stability. Certain body plans persisted with relatively little change for millions of years, suggesting successful adaptation to consistent ecological niches. Others diversified rapidly when new opportunities emerged. This balance between stability and change is one of the defining features of life itself. Too much change leads to extinction. Too little change leads to stagnation. Life exists in the tension between the two. When viewed from this perspective, dinosaurs become less like symbols of ancient power and more like participants in an ongoing evolutionary equilibrium that still defines Earth today. Birds, as their surviving descendants, continue this pattern in visible form. They occupy nearly every environment on the planet, from polar regions to tropical forests, from deserts to open oceans. Their diversity reflects the same adaptive flexibility that once defined their dinosaur ancestors. A sparrow and a swan are separated by immense differences in form, behavior, and habitat, yet both carry the same deep evolutionary heritage. In a quiet way, every bird is a continuation of that ancient lineage. This continuity is one of the most remarkable aspects of natural history. Extinction does not always erase a lineage completely. Sometimes it narrows it, sometimes it redirects it, sometimes it transforms it into something so different that its origin becomes almost invisible without scientific reconstruction. The dinosaur story, then, is not a closed chapter. It is a branching sequence. One branch ended, others continued, and those branches continue to grow even now, in forms that still move through air, water, and land. Meanwhile, the fossil record continues to expand our understanding of how rich that original branching once was. Each new discovery adds nuance rather than simplicity. A newly found species does not replace older knowledge, it modifies it. It shifts timelines slightly, adjusts relationships, refines interpretations. Science progresses not by reaching final answers, but by gradually reducing uncertainty while acknowledging that some uncertainty will always remain. This is especially true for behavior. We may never know exactly how most dinosaurs interacted socially, how they vocalized in detail, or how they perceived color and sound in their environments. We can estimate, model, and infer, but not fully reconstruct subjective experience. And yet, even without complete access to their inner lives, dinosaurs still communicate something essential about existence. They demonstrate that life can persist, diversify, and dominate for spans of time that dwarf human history. They show that what feels permanent in the moment is often only temporary in geological terms, and they reveal that extinction is not an exception in Earth's story, but a recurring process within it. Still, this does not diminish the significance of life. If anything, it highlights how extraordinary persistence itself is, against constant change, against environmental instability, against catastrophic events. Life continues, not in identical forms, but in continuous transformation. As the narration moves deeper into this perspective, the dinosaurs become less like distant figures and more like reflections of Earth's own capacity for change. Their rise and fall is not separate from the planet. It is an expression of the planet's behavior over time, and in that realization, something quietly stabilizing emerges. A sense that existence is not fragile in isolation, but resilient through transition. That what ends does not simply vanish, it becomes part of what follows. That continuity can be difficult to perceive in everyday life, where change often appears sudden and disruptive, but deep time reveals a different pattern. Across millions of years, transformation becomes the norm rather than the exception. Entire ecosystems shift gradually from one form into another, carrying traces of the past forward even as they create something entirely new. Dinosaurs illustrate this process with unusual clarity. Their story begins with relatively small animals inhabiting a world recovering from catastrophe. It expands into an era of extraordinary diversity and ecological dominance. It passes through countless environmental changes, adaptations, and extinctions within extinction, and finally it transitions into a different biological age, whose foundations were shaped by everything that came before. Seen this way, the dinosaur age resembles less a separate world, and more a long movement within a larger symphony of life. A movement with its own rhythms, themes, and variations. One that lasted far longer than human civilization has existed. And perhaps because of this immense duration, it is easy to forget how many individual lives were contained within it. Every fossil represents a single organism, one animal, one life, one brief experience within an incomprehensibly vast timeline. A massive sauropod that crossed ancient floodplains for decades, a feathered juvenile surviving its first winter, a predator navigating territory shaped by seasonal drought, an egg buried beneath vegetation, carrying genetic information refined through countless generations. These individual lives rarely appear in broad geological narratives, yet they are the building blocks of everything. Evolution does not occur at the scale of eras. It occurs at the scale of organisms living, reproducing, adapting, and dying. Millions upon millions of ordinary days created the extraordinary age we now call the Age of Dinosaurs. There is something calming in that realization. Great historical patterns emerge from small repeated actions, not from dramatic moments alone. A forest is built leaf by leaf. A coastline changes grain by grain. An evolutionary lineage transforms generation by generation. The immense is often constructed from the ordinary. This perspective becomes especially powerful when considering how dinosaurs interacted with their environments. Modern ecosystems teach us that animals are not passive occupants of landscapes. They actively shape them. Herbivores influence vegetation patterns. Predators regulate populations. Nesting behavior alters soil conditions. Migration redistributes nutrients across large regions. Dinosaurs likely participated in these same ecological processes on a colossal scale. Large herds moving across floodplains may have transformed plant communities through grazing. Massive bodies traveling along recurring routes could have created pathways influencing water flow and vegetation growth. Nesting colonies may have altered local ecosystems year after year, creating concentrated zones of biological activity. The dinosaur world was not merely a backdrop for life. It was continuously reshaped by life itself, and this relationship between organism and environment remains one of the central themes of Earth's history. Life changes the planet, and the planet changes life in return. The interaction never stops. Ancient plants modified atmospheric chemistry. Microorganisms transformed oceans. Forests influenced climate systems. Animals altered landscapes. Each participant contributed to conditions that influenced future participants. The result is a planet that evolves not only geologically but biologically as well. Dinosaurs existed within this ongoing dialogue for over 160 million years, long enough to witness continental drift changing coastlines, long enough for mountain ranges to rise and erode, long enough for entire ecological communities to appear and disappear repeatedly. From a human perspective, such durations are almost impossible to visualize. If all of human recorded history were compressed into a single minute, the age of dinosaurs would stretch for many hours. Civilizations that feel ancient to us would barely register against the scale of their existence. And yet, despite this immense span, the dinosaur age itself occupies only a portion of Earth's history. The planet formed over 4.5 billion years ago. Complex multicellular life arrived much later. Dinosaurs emerged relatively late within that timeline. Humans arrived only at the very end. This layered perspective does not reduce human significance. Rather, it expands the context in which significance exists. It reminds us that being part of a larger story does not make a chapter unimportant. Sometimes it makes it more meaningful. because meaning is not measured by duration alone. A brief event can reshape millions of years that follow. A small adaptation can alter the course of an entire lineage. A single asteroid can transform planetary history, and a single fossil discovery can change how an entire species is understood. Paleontology is filled with such moments. A bone preserved in the right conditions, a footprint exposed by erosion, a feather impression hidden within stone, tiny details capable of reshaping broad scientific narratives. This is another reason the field remains so active and compelling. Unlike sciences that focus primarily on repeatable present-day observations, paleontology reconstructs systems that can never be directly revisited. Every new piece of evidence has the potential to alter interpretations, because the available record is always incomplete. Yet incompleteness is not a flaw, it is a feature of the process. The Earth preserves selectively. Some environments create fossils easily, others erase biological traces almost completely. Entire ecosystems may have existed without leaving significant records behind. Species may have evolved and disappeared without ever entering the fossil archive. What survives is not a complete inventory of the past. It is a sample, a fragmentary but extraordinarily informative sample, and from those fragments, scientists continue to reconstruct worlds of astonishing richness. There is something almost archaeological about the imagination required for this work. Not imagination detached from reality, but imagination disciplined by evidence. The ability to look at a weathered bone and perceive not merely anatomy but ecology, not merely structure but context. A tooth implies diet. Diet implies habitat. Habitat implies climate. Climate implies geography. One clue leads naturally to another until isolated objects become interconnected systems. And slowly, the prehistoric world reappears, not perfectly, not completely, but enough to reveal its complexity, enough to reveal its beauty, enough to remind us that Earth has hosted forms of life far stranger, larger, and more varied than anything living today. The dinosaur age was not an exception to nature. It was nature, as real as modern forests, as real as oceans, as real as birds calling outside a window this evening. Its landscapes existed beneath the same sun that shines today. Its rivers reflected the same moon. Its creatures experienced the same physical universe, governed by the same laws of gravity, chemistry, and evolution. The distance between their world and ours is measured not by reality, but by time. And time, though immense, is also connective, because every living organism on Earth today inherits something from the countless organisms that came before. Life is not a series of isolated beginnings. It is a continuous thread stretching backward through every generation, every adaptation, every extinction, every survival. And somewhere along that thread, deep within the long tapestry of Earth's history, the dinosaurs continue their quiet passage across ancient landscapes, leaving footprints that still guide our curiosity millions of years later. That curiosity itself is an interesting phenomenon. Dinosaurs disappeared tens of millions of years before the first human being appeared, and yet few subjects capture human attention with such consistency across cultures and generations. Children become fascinated by them almost instinctively. Adults continue studying them with the same sense of wonder. Scientists dedicate entire careers to understanding fragments of their world. Part of this fascination may come from scale. Dinosaurs challenge our ordinary expectations of what animals can be. A creature longer than a basketball court, a skull larger than a human body, a neck reaching the height of a multi-story building. These dimensions stretch imagination beyond familiar experience, but size alone cannot explain their enduring appeal. Whales are enormous, mountains are enormous, galaxies are enormous. Yet dinosaurs occupy a special place in the human mind because they combine scale with mystery. They are simultaneously real and inaccessible. We know they existed, yet we can never observe them directly. They belong to a world that is scientifically documented but forever out of reach. This creates a rare balance between certainty and wonder. Too much certainty can reduce curiosity. Too much uncertainty can prevent understanding. Dinosaurs exist precisely between those extremes, and perhaps nowhere is this balance more evident than in the way paleontologists reconstruct behavior. A fossilized skeleton provides structure, But behavior leaves subtler traces. To understand how an animal lived, scientists often look beyond bones toward patterns embedded within ecosystems. Nesting grounds provide one example. In several locations around the world, paleontologists have discovered entire colonies where dinosaurs returned repeatedly to lay eggs. Some sites contain thousands of nests arranged across ancient landscapes, suggesting organized breeding behavior on a remarkable scale. Imagine such a scene during the height of the nesting season. Across a broad floodplain warmed by prehistoric sunlight, hundreds or perhaps thousands of dinosaurs gather. Adults carefully select nesting locations. Eggs are buried or protected according to species-specific strategies. Hatchlings emerge into environments already shaped by generations that came before them. The landscape becomes not merely habitat, but memory, a place revisited year after year, a place encoded into behavior through evolution and experience. Modern birds demonstrate similar patterns today. Certain species migrate astonishing distances only to return to familiar breeding grounds with extraordinary accuracy. Sea turtles cross oceans and locate the same beaches where they themselves hatched decades earlier. Such behaviors remind us that memory exists at many levels: individual memory, genetic memory, evolutionary memory, patterns repeated so often that they become part of the structure of life itself. Dinosaurs likely participated in these deep behavioral rhythms for millions of years. And while individual species came and went, certain ecological patterns persisted across enormous stretches of time. Predators hunted, herbivores migrated, plants responded to climate, rivers redistributed nutrients, seasonal cycles governed reproduction and growth. These recurring patterns create a sense of continuity that extends beyond any single species. Life changes constantly, yet many of its underlying processes remain remarkably stable. A forest today operates according to principles recognizable in ancient ecosystems. Energy flows through food webs. Organisms compete and cooperate. Environmental conditions influence survival. Evolution responds to opportunity and constraint. The details differ, but the fundamental processes endure. This continuity becomes especially striking when examining dinosaur physiology. For many years, scientists debated whether dinosaurs were cold-blooded like traditional reptiles or warm-blooded like birds and mammals. Modern evidence increasingly suggests that many species occupied a more complex middle ground, with metabolic systems capable of supporting active lifestyles and sustained growth. The implications are significant. An active metabolism changes how an animal interacts with its environment. It influences behavior, feeding requirements, movement patterns, and ecological roles. It transforms a creature from a slow-moving presence into a dynamic participant within its ecosystem. The image of dinosaurs as sluggish animals lingering in swamps has largely faded from scientific understanding. In its place emerges a picture of energetic, adaptable creatures occupying diverse ecological niches across the globe. Some likely moved with surprising speed. Others traveled vast distances during migration. Many cared for offspring. Some may have displayed intricate social behaviors. The prehistoric world becomes more familiar the more carefully it is studied, not because dinosaurs become less extraordinary, but because they become more alive. And living creatures, regardless of era, often share common challenges: finding food, avoiding danger, navigating environments, reproducing successfully, raising young. These universal biological themes connect modern life with prehistoric life across immense spans of time. A hatchling dinosaur emerging from its egg faced uncertainties not entirely different from those confronting young animals today. The specific predators differed, the plants differed, the climate differed, yet the fundamental challenge of survival remained. Life begins small. The world appears large. Adaptation determines what follows. Perhaps this is one reason dinosaur stories resonate so deeply. Beneath their unusual forms, they participate in patterns that feel familiar. Growth, struggle, exploration, competition, cooperation, aging, and extinction are themes shared across much of life on Earth. Dinosaurs simply express those themes on a particularly grand canvas. And what a canvas it was. For over 160 million years, the continents themselves shifted beneath dinosaur feet. The supercontinent Pangaea gradually fragmented into separate landmasses. New coastlines formed. Ocean currents changed direction. Geographic isolation created opportunities for evolutionary divergence. Species that once shared habitats became separated by expanding seas. Different environments produced different adaptations. Entire ecosystems evolved independently. This geological transformation helps explain the remarkable diversity seen throughout the fossil record. Dinosaurs were not a single unified group moving through a static world. They were countless lineages responding to countless environmental pressures across changing continents. A dinosaur living in what is now South America inhabited a world increasingly distinct from one living in what would become Asia. Over millions of years, these differences accumulated. Evolution explored new possibilities. New body plans emerged. New ecological strategies appeared. The dinosaur age became not one story, but many stories unfolding simultaneously across the planet. And beneath all of them lay a persistent geological rhythm. Volcanoes erupted, mountains rose, rivers changed course, sediments accumulated. The Earth itself remained active, constantly reshaping the stage upon which life evolved. This interplay between geology and biology is one of the most beautiful aspects of deep time science. Life influences the planet, but the planet also influences life. Neither operates independently for long. A changing climate alters vegetation. Vegetation influences atmospheric chemistry. Atmospheric chemistry affects temperature. Temperature shapes ecosystems. Ecosystems guide evolution. The cycle continues endlessly. Dinosaurs lived within this interconnected system just as modern organisms do today. They were not separate from nature. They were expressions of it. And through their fossils, preserved across continents and centuries of discovery, they continue to reveal how profoundly connected life and Earth have always been. The more closely we examine their world, the more we discover that it was not merely ancient. It was alive with complexity, adaptation, and change. An immense chapter in a story that is still unfolding around us now. And perhaps one of the most remarkable aspects of that unfolding story is how often it surprises us. The history of dinosaur research is filled with moments when long-held assumptions gave way to entirely new understandings. Each generation of scientists inherits a picture of the prehistoric world, only to discover that the reality was more complex, more nuanced, and often more fascinating than expected. A century ago, many dinosaurs were imagined as oversized reptiles moving sluggishly through swampy environments. Today, evidence points toward active, dynamic animals inhabiting ecosystems of extraordinary diversity. Feathers, social behavior, parental care, migration, and sophisticated sensory adaptations have all reshaped how these creatures are understood. This continual revision is not a sign of uncertainty in science. It is a sign of strength. Science does not become valuable because it never changes. It becomes valuable because it is willing to change when new evidence appears. The fossil record, though incomplete, constantly offers opportunities for refinement. A newly discovered skeleton may reveal muscle attachments that alter estimates of movement. A nest site may transform assumptions about reproduction. A microscopic analysis of fossilized tissue may provide clues about growth rates or metabolism. Piece by piece, a clearer picture emerges. Not complete, perhaps never complete, but increasingly detailed. And there is something deeply satisfying about this process. It mirrors the way understanding develops in many areas of life, rarely through sudden revelation, more often through accumulation. Through observation layered upon observation until patterns become visible. The dinosaur world rewards patience. The more carefully it is studied, the richer it becomes. Take, for example, the question of color. For generations, no one truly knew what colors dinosaurs might have been. Artists painted them in shades of green, brown, or gray, largely because those colors seemed plausible. But recent discoveries involving microscopic pigment structures preserved in fossilized feathers have begun offering clues. Some feathered dinosaurs may have displayed reddish hues, others may have exhibited striped patterns. Some likely possessed iridescent feathers that shimmered differently depending on the angle of light. Suddenly, ancient ecosystems become more vivid. A small dinosaur moving through sunlight is no longer a silhouette. It becomes an animal of texture, color, and visual communication, and color itself tells stories. Bright feathers may indicate courtship displays, patterns may provide camouflage, contrasting markings may aid recognition within social groups, aesthetic details become ecological clues. The prehistoric world grows more alive with every discovery. And yet, even as science reveals greater detail, it often reveals greater mystery as well. Each answer tends to generate new questions. If certain dinosaurs possessed elaborate plumage, how exactly was it used? If some species cared for offspring extensively, what social structures supported that behavior? If particular dinosaurs migrated long distances, what environmental cues guided their journeys? Knowledge expands outward rather than closing inward. The boundary of understanding moves, but it never disappears. This endless horizon of inquiry is one reason paleontology remains so captivating. There is always another layer waiting beneath the current one, another fossil, another site, another interpretation, another possibility, and all of it unfolds against the backdrop of deep time, where patience is measured not in years, but in ages. Even the process of fossilization reflects this patience. For a dinosaur bone to survive into the present, an extraordinary sequence of events must occur. The animal dies. Its remains avoid complete destruction by scavengers, weather, or decay. Sediment covers the bones relatively quickly. Minerals gradually replace organic material over immense periods. Geological forces preserve rather than obliterate the resulting fossil. Finally, erosion or excavation exposes it millions of years later. The odds are remarkably small. Every fossil represents a kind of geological miracle, not supernatural, but improbably fortunate, a chain of circumstances extending across epochs. This means that the fossils we possess are only a tiny fraction of all dinosaurs that ever lived. Countless individuals left no trace. Entire populations may have vanished without entering the fossil record at all. What we know is extraordinary. What remains unknown is likely even more extraordinary. And perhaps that balance between knowledge and absence contributes to the calm fascination dinosaurs inspire. They remind us that understanding does not require completeness. One can appreciate a landscape without seeing every grain of sand. One can study a forest without cataloging every leaf. Likewise, we can learn profound truths about the dinosaur age, even while much of it remains hidden. One of those truths concerns resilience. The dinosaur era spanned environmental changes that would have seemed unimaginable from the perspective of any single species. Continents drifted apart. Sea levels rose and fell. Volcanic events altered climates, ecosystems reorganized repeatedly. Yet life persisted, not unchanged, not without loss, but persistently. Species adapted, new forms emerged, old forms disappeared. The larger process continued. There is a quiet reassurance in this pattern. Earth's history is not a story of uninterrupted stability. It is a story of adaptation within change. The dinosaurs exemplify this reality perhaps better than any other group of animals. Their longevity was not the result of remaining the same. It was the result of evolving continuously in response to shifting conditions. Success, in evolutionary terms, often means flexibility, the ability to respond, the ability to adjust, the ability to occupy new opportunities when old ones disappear. And while individual species may vanish, the broader processes of life continue exploring new possibilities. This perspective transforms extinction from a simple ending into part of a larger cycle, not a pleasant event, not a trivial one, but a component of Earth's long biological rhythm. Forests recover after fire. Coral reefs rebuild after disturbance. New species emerge where ecological space becomes available. Life does not move backward. It reorganizes. Dinosaurs participated in that rhythm for millions of years, and their descendants continue participating in it today. Every bird perched on a branch carries echoes of ancient evolutionary experiments. Every feather contains a history stretching back into the Mesozoic era. Every migration traces patterns shaped by processes far older than humanity itself. The ancient world is not entirely behind us. Fragments of it remain woven into the present, and perhaps nowhere is this more apparent than in the sky. A hawk gliding on thermal currents, a gull crossing an ocean coastline, a raven navigating forest canopies with remarkable intelligence. These creatures are modern, yet they are also reminders, living connections to ecosystems that existed before mammals dominated the planet. Small windows through which the distant past continues to look back at us as evening settles over modern landscapes and birds gradually quiet for the night. It is possible to imagine similar transitions occurring millions of years ago. Ancient forests darkening beneath fading light, feathered dinosaurs settling into sheltered locations, large herbivores gathering near water, predators becoming active as temperatures cool, the daily rhythm of life continuing beneath unfamiliar constellations. Different species, different continents, different ages, yet the same Earth, turning steadily through darkness and dawn. The same planet carrying living things through another night, just as it does now. That steady turning may be one of the most enduring themes in the story of dinosaurs. Through every chapter of their long existence, the Earth continued rotating beneath them, carrying forests, oceans, deserts, and mountains through endless cycles of day and night. Individual lives began and ended. Species appeared and disappeared. Entire ecosystems transformed, yet the planet itself remained in motion, quietly connecting every moment across time. If one could observe the dinosaur age from far above, watching millions of years pass in accelerated sequence, the changes would appear both dramatic and strangely fluid. Shorelines would advance and retreat like breathing. Forests would spread across continents and then give way to different vegetation. Mountain ranges would rise slowly before weathering down again. Dinosaur species would emerge, diversify, and fade into extinction, while others expanded into newly available ecological spaces. The world would never appear static. And yet, at every moment within that vast flow, life would seem completely normal to the creatures experiencing it. A juvenile dinosaur searching for food would not perceive itself as living during a major evolutionary transition. A migrating herd would not know that continents were slowly separating beneath its feet. A predator crossing a riverbank would not recognize that its species would someday exist only as fossils. Existence unfolds locally. The larger patterns become visible only afterward. This is one of the reasons deep time feels so profound. It allows us to see structures that are invisible from within individual lifetimes. Patterns emerge that no single organism could ever perceive. Entire ages become visible as coherent chapters, even though they were experienced only as ordinary days by the creatures living through them. In many ways, dinosaurs invite us to think beyond the scale of personal experience, not by diminishing the importance of individual lives, but by placing them within broader contexts. Every dinosaur life mattered within its own ecosystem. Every individual participated in relationships that influenced survival, reproduction, and environmental change. Yet those lives also contributed to processes far larger than themselves. The same is true throughout nature. A tree contributes to a forest contributes to a climate influences ecosystems. Ecosystems shape evolution. Small actions accumulate into large consequences. The age of dinosaurs emerged through countless such accumulations. Generation after generation, life interacted with environment. Successful traits spread. Unsuccessful traits disappeared. New ecological opportunities opened. New challenges emerged. Evolution responded not through planning, but through persistence. Over millions of years, persistence can accomplish extraordinary things. It can produce wings from forelimbs. It can produce giants from small ancestors. It can transform ecosystems across entire continents. And it can leave behind a fossil record rich enough to be studied tens of millions of years later. One particularly fascinating aspect of this record involves growth itself. Some dinosaur bones preserve evidence of injuries, diseases, and healing. Fractures mended, infections left marks, stress altered development. These traces remind us that dinosaurs were not abstract biological categories. They were living animals experiencing the physical realities of existence. A healed injury suggests survival after hardship. A damaged bone suggests adaptation and recovery. An elderly individual with signs of wear suggests a long life lived within a challenging environment. Such details create unexpected intimacy. The fossil record often feels grand because of its scale, but it also contains countless small stories. Stories of individuals navigating ordinary biological challenges, stories of resilience, stories of persistence. In one sense, paleontology studies extinction. In another, it studies survival. After all, every fossilized adult dinosaur represents an organism that survived long enough to grow, reproduce, and interact with its environment. Every successful lineage reflects millions of years of adaptation. Every species preserved in stone is evidence of life finding ways to continue despite constant change. This balance between vulnerability and persistence appears everywhere in Earth's history. Species disappear. Life continues. Environments shift. Life adapts. Catastrophes occur. Life recovers. The details vary, but the underlying rhythm remains remarkably consistent. Perhaps this is why the dinosaur story feels less tragic the deeper one explores it. At first glance, the narrative seems dominated by extinction. Giant animals ruled the world and then vanished. But a broader perspective reveals something more complex. The story is not primarily about loss. It is about transformation. Dinosaurs changed the planet while they lived. Their descendants survived in modified forms. Their extinction created opportunities for other groups. Their fossils continue shaping scientific understanding today. Their influence extends far beyond their physical existence. And influence, unlike organisms, can persist indefinitely. Even modern ecosystems bear indirect marks of the dinosaur era. The distribution of species, the structure of food webs, the history of plant evolution, and the diversification of birds all carry connections to events that occurred during the Mesozoic. The past remains active within the present, not visibly, not dramatically, but continuously. This continuity becomes easier to appreciate when considering the immense age of life itself. Dinosaurs occupied only one segment of a much larger biological story. Before them came vast ages dominated by marine organisms, early forests, giant insects, amphibians, and countless other forms. After them came mammals, grasslands, modern ecosystems, and eventually humanity. No chapter exists independently. Each one influences what follows. The history of life resembles a river more than a sequence of isolated events. Water moves forward, but every bend shapes the next bend. Every tributary alters the course downstream. The river changes constantly while remaining connected. Dinosaurs were one of the largest currents within that river. Powerful, long-lasting, transformative, yet still part of a larger flow. There is something deeply relaxing about this perspective because it shifts attention away from urgency and toward continuity. Modern life often emphasizes immediate outcomes, immediate concerns, immediate timelines. Deep time dissolves that focus. It reminds us that reality operates across many scales simultaneously. Moments matter, years matter, millions of years matter. Each scale reveals different truths. A single day reveals behavior. A lifetime reveals growth. An era reveals evolution. The dinosaur story exists primarily at the scale of eras, where patterns emerge slowly, and where change becomes visible only through patience. And patience is perhaps the central virtue of paleontology. Fossils wait millions of years to be discovered. Excavations require painstaking effort. Interpretations evolve gradually. Understanding accumulates one clue at a time. The process mirrors the subject itself. Just as evolution proceeds through countless small steps, scientific knowledge advances through countless observations. Neither relies on sudden certainty. Both rely on continuity. As more fossils are uncovered and more techniques developed, the picture of the dinosaur world will continue changing. Future discoveries will undoubtedly challenge current assumptions. New species will be identified. Old classifications will be revised. Unexpected evidence will emerge from places not yet explored. The prehistoric world is still revealing itself, and perhaps it always will, because no matter how much knowledge accumulates, the scale of the subject remains immense. The age of dinosaurs spans such extraordinary lengths of time and such enormous geographic diversity that complete understanding may never be possible. Yet completeness is not necessary for wonder. In some ways, wonder depends on the presence of horizons. A horizon marks the boundary between what is visible and what lies beyond. Dinosaurs inhabit that boundary perfectly, known enough to feel real, mysterious enough to remain captivating, present enough to influence the modern world, distant enough to invite endless curiosity. And as the Earth continues its quiet rotation beneath modern skies, carrying forests, oceans, birds, and human observers through another evening, the traces of that ancient age remain where they have always been, embedded within stone, woven into living lineages, and waiting patiently beneath the surface of the world. Waiting is, in many ways, the natural state of the fossil record. For millions of years, bones remain hidden beneath layers of sediment, untouched by human curiosity, preserved through immense stretches of time that pass without witness. Entire species can lie beneath the ground unknown, their existence erased from memory before memory itself even evolved. Then, often through circumstances that seem almost accidental, a fragment emerges. A cliff erodes after heavy rain. A river changes course. A construction project exposes ancient rock. A paleontologist notices a shape that appears slightly different from the surrounding stone. And suddenly, a connection is made across tens of millions of years. Few scientific experiences carry such a powerful sense of temporal distance. To place a hand near a fossilized bone is to encounter something that existed in a world so ancient that even the continents were arranged differently. The object itself becomes a bridge between realities separated by spans of time almost beyond comprehension. Yet the bridge works. The mind crosses it naturally. One begins imagining the animal, the environment, the sounds, the weather, the daily rhythms of a vanished ecosystem. A single fossil can awaken an entire landscape. This ability of small traces to evoke enormous worlds is one of the most remarkable aspects of paleontology. A tooth suggests a predator suggests prey suggests vegetation suggests climate suggests geography. From a fragment, a system begins to appear, and systems are ultimately what dinosaurs inhabited. No species exists alone. Every organism participates in networks of energy, competition, cooperation, and environmental exchange. Dinosaurs were no exception. Even the most powerful predators depended on the health of ecosystems supporting herbivore populations. Even giant herbivores depended on plant communities shaped by soil, climate, rainfall, and countless other factors. The prehistoric world functioned through relationships, just as modern ecosystems do. This interconnectedness becomes especially apparent when scientists study mass extinction events. Extinction rarely spreads uniformly across all forms of life. Some groups disappear entirely, others survive. The outcome depends not only on the characteristics of individual species, but also on their position within broader ecological networks. When environmental conditions change rapidly, interconnected systems can become vulnerable. Food chains destabilize, habitats shrink, resources shift. Survival becomes increasingly difficult. The asteroid impact at the end of the Cretaceous illustrates this principle on a planetary scale. The event itself was sudden, but many of its biological consequences unfolded through ecological disruption. Reduced sunlight affected plant growth. Reduced plant growth affected herbivores. Herbivore decline affected predators. The effects moved through networks. Life responded according to its relationships. And yet, even within this disruption, some lineages endured. Small mammals survived. Birds survived. Many reptiles survived. Countless insects survived. Life adapted to new conditions and continued evolving. This resilience remains one of the most extraordinary themes in Earth's history. Not resilience in the sense of avoiding change, but resilience through change, the capacity of life to reorganize, diversify, and continue despite repeated challenges is visible throughout the fossil record. Dinosaurs themselves embodied that capacity for an astonishing length of time. For over 160 million years, they persisted through environmental shifts that would have seemed dramatic from any shorter perspective. During that span, climates fluctuated, sea levels changed, continents drifted, and ecosystems reorganized repeatedly. Still, dinosaur lineages adapted and diversified. Their success was not based on permanence, it was based on flexibility. The same principle continues operating today. Every ecosystem contains species responding to changing conditions. Evolution has not ended. Adaptation has not stopped. The processes that shaped dinosaurs remain active all around us, though often at timescales too gradual for immediate observation. This continuity between past and present is one of the most important insights offered by paleontology. Dinosaurs are not separate from the modern world. They are part of the history that produced it. The atmosphere we breathe, the landscapes we inhabit, the organisms we encounter, all emerged through chains of events extending deep into geological time. Even human beings are participants in those chains. Our own existence depends on evolutionary pathways influenced by events that occurred long before mammals became dominant. The asteroid impact, continental drift, climate shifts, and countless other prehistoric developments helped create conditions that eventually made human evolution possible. In this sense, studying dinosaurs is not merely an exploration of something distant, it is an exploration of origins. Not direct origins, but contextual ones. The world we know did not appear suddenly. It emerged gradually from worlds that came before. And among those earlier worlds, the dinosaur age remains one of the most influential. There is also something humbling about recognizing how much of Earth's history unfolded without human observation. Modern culture often places humanity at the center of narratives, but deep time presents a broader perspective. For most of the planet's existence, no human eyes existed to witness its landscapes. Rivers flowed, mountains rose, forests expanded, dinosaurs migrated, seasons changed, all without an audience. Nature did not require observation to be real. The prehistoric world existed fully whether or not anyone understood it. This realization can feel strangely peaceful. It suggests that reality extends beyond human concerns, beyond human timelines, beyond human interpretations. The Earth possesses a history far larger than any civilization, ideology, or individual life. And yet humans are capable of learning about that history, capable of uncovering traces, recognizing patterns, and reconstructing events that occurred millions of years before our species appeared. That capacity for understanding is itself remarkable. Through science, the modern mind reaches backward across immense distances and touches fragments of vanished worlds, not perfectly, not completely, but meaningfully. Every fossil discovery expands that connection. Every new interpretation deepens it. Every unanswered question preserves it. Because mystery plays an essential role in sustaining curiosity. If every detail of the dinosaur world were somehow known, some of its fascination might disappear. The unknown creates space for exploration. It keeps the story open, and the story remains very open indeed. Entire regions of the world remain underexplored paleontologically. New technologies continue revealing information once thought inaccessible. Advances in imaging, chemistry, and computational modeling allow scientists to investigate fossils with increasing sophistication. Questions that seemed impossible a generation ago are now actively studied. Future discoveries will almost certainly reveal aspects of dinosaur biology we have not yet imagined. The prehistoric world still contains surprises. Perhaps it always will, because the scale of the subject is immense. Hundreds of millions of years, thousands of species, countless ecosystems, a fossil record scattered across every continent. No single narrative can encompass it entirely. Instead, understanding grows gradually. Like a landscape emerging through morning mist, shapes appear, details sharpen, connections become visible, yet distant horizons remain, and those horizons continue drawing curiosity forward. As night settles over the modern world, it is comforting to remember that the same planet carrying us through darkness tonight once carried dinosaurs beneath equally vast skies. Different stars may have occupied slightly different positions, different forests covered the land, different animals moved through the shadows, but the essential rhythms endured. Day followed night, seasons followed seasons, life adapted, the earth turned, and somewhere, deep beneath layers of stone and time, the evidence of those ancient rhythms still rests quietly, waiting for the next discovery to bring another small piece of the dinosaur world back into the light, and into human awareness, where the ancient past continues to find new meaning. Each fossil uncovered from stone enters a world very different from the one in which it was formed. What was once part of a living animal becomes part of a scientific investigation. What was once embedded in a prehistoric ecosystem becomes embedded in a modern story about Earth's history. Yet, despite this transition, something of the original reality remains. A fossilized claw still carries the shape of movement. A tooth still reflects the mechanics of feeding. A vertebra still reveals how a body supported its weight against gravity. These details are not merely symbolic. They are physical traces of actual lives, lived in actual environments. The dinosaur world was not a mythological age. It was a real chapter in the history of the planet, as tangible and concrete as the forests, oceans, and deserts that exist today. Sometimes, this reality becomes especially vivid through exceptional discoveries. On rare occasions, paleontologists uncover fossils so well preserved that even delicate structures survive. Feather impressions remain visible, skin textures appear along fossilized bodies. Tiny details of anatomy emerge that would otherwise have been lost forever. These discoveries narrow the distance between imagination and evidence. They remind us that dinosaurs were not collections of bones. They were complete organisms. They possessed muscles, scales, feathers, eyes, internal organs, and behaviors shaped by millions of years of evolution. They occupied ecological roles with the same immediacy that modern animals occupy theirs. A dinosaur did not experience itself as prehistoric. It experienced itself simply as alive. This simple observation may seem obvious, yet it changes how one imagines the ancient world. Too often the past becomes abstract. It turns into a sequence of events rather than a collection of lived experiences. But every ecosystem, no matter how distant, was once present to the creatures within it. Rain felt like rain. Cold felt like cold. Hunger felt like hunger. The warmth of sunlight, the sound of moving water, the pressure of migration, the search for shelter. These realities connected prehistoric life with life today. The forms were different. The experiences were not entirely so. This continuity of experience is one reason modern animals provide valuable insights into dinosaur behavior. Birds and crocodilians, the closest living relatives of dinosaurs, offer clues about communication, parenting, social interaction, and physiology. While no modern species perfectly replicates dinosaur behavior, evolutionary relationships create useful points of comparison. A bird defending its nest today may reveal something about instincts present deep within dinosaur ancestry. A crocodile guarding hatchlings may hint at parental behaviors that existed millions of years ago. Patterns echo across time, not identically, but recognizably. And these echoes help transform fossils from static objects into participants within larger biological narratives. One particularly fascinating area of research involves dinosaur growth and development. Fossil evidence suggests that some species experienced life stages so different that juveniles and adults occupied distinct ecological roles. A young dinosaur might feed differently, move differently, and face different predators than a mature individual of the same species. In effect, a single species could function almost like multiple animals throughout its lifespan. This strategy reduced competition between age groups and allowed populations to use resources more efficiently. Modern ecosystems display similar patterns. Young and adult animals often inhabit different niches, reducing pressure on shared food sources and habitats. Again, the ancient world feels less alien the more closely it is examined. The details differ, the underlying principles remain, and those principles reveal something profound about life itself. Evolution repeatedly discovers solutions to recurring challenges. Energy must be acquired. Offspring must survive. Predators must find prey. Organisms must adapt to changing conditions. The specifics vary, but the problems remain remarkably consistent across geological time. Dinosaurs solved those problems in ways that allowed them to thrive for over 160 million years. That duration is worth pausing to consider, not because it is large in an abstract sense, but because it represents a span of time during which entire mountain ranges formed and eroded. Rivers changed course countless times, coastlines advanced and retreated, species evolved, diversified, and vanished in endless succession. Human history feels immense to us because it exceeds individual lifetimes. The dinosaur age exceeded entire categories of human understanding. Its scale challenges intuition, yet scale alone does not explain its significance. What makes the dinosaur era remarkable is not merely how long it lasted, but how dynamic it remained throughout that duration. New species emerged continuously. Ecological relationships shifted. Continents rearranged themselves. Evolution explored countless possibilities. The age of dinosaurs was not a static reign. It was a constantly changing world, sustained across immense spans of time. Perhaps this is why the story continues to feel fresh despite decades of research. There is no single dinosaur narrative. There are thousands. Every species represents a different adaptation. Every fossil site reveals a different environment. Every geological formation preserves a different moment in Earth's history. Together, these moments form a mosaic rather than a linear story. A vast collection of interconnected worlds, some humid and tropical, some cold and seasonal, some dominated by towering herbivores, others filled with smaller feathered hunters. Each ecosystem possessed its own rhythms, challenges, and opportunities, and all of them existed beneath the same overarching processes of evolution, geology, and time. Time, perhaps more than anything else, is the true protagonist of the dinosaur story, not as an abstract measurement, but as an active force shaping everything it touches. Time transforms landscapes. Time reshapes climates. Time guides evolution. Time erodes mountains and preserves fossils. Time removes species and creates opportunities for new ones. Without deep time, dinosaurs would not exist. Without deep time, neither would we. The concept can feel overwhelming at first. Millions of years stretch far beyond ordinary comprehension. Yet when viewed calmly, deep time offers a unique kind of perspective. It reveals that change is natural, that adaptation is continuous, and that life persists through transformation rather than permanence. The dinosaurs embody these lessons beautifully. Their world vanished, yet aspects of it survive. Their species disappeared, yet descendants remain. Their ecosystems ended, yet they influenced those that followed. Nothing remained exactly the same. Nothing disappeared entirely without consequence. The ancient world continues to shape the modern one in subtle ways. Even our understanding of extinction, evolution, and ecological resilience has been profoundly influenced by studying dinosaurs. They provide one of the clearest examples of how life responds to both opportunity and catastrophe. Through them, scientists learn not only about the past, but about the broader patterns governing life on Earth, and those patterns remain relevant today. Ecosystems continue changing, species continue adapting, climate continues influencing biological systems. The processes that shaped dinosaurs have not stopped operating. They continue around us, often quietly, often gradually, but continuously. This continuity creates an unexpected sense of connection across time. The dinosaur age is not isolated behind a wall of history. It is linked to the present through countless chains of cause and effect, stretching across millions of years. Every living thing participates in those chains. Every organism inherits a world shaped by previous organisms. Every generation modifies conditions for those that follow. Life is cumulative. The past remains present within it. And so as we follow the traces left behind by dinosaurs, we are not merely looking backward. We are observing one section of a much larger continuum, an ongoing story of adaptation, persistence, and transformation that began long before the first dinosaur stepped onto the Earth and continues quietly unfolding beneath the stars tonight.